The council chambers buzzed with the usual morning activity. Representatives from 47 different species moved through the grand hall, their voices creating a symphony of different languages and tones. The massive circular room stretched upward into a dome that showed the stars beyond, a reminder that they all shared the same galaxy. Hyun arrived early as always. She represented the Velkari Coalition, a position she had held for 12 years. She walked past the empty seats reserved for smaller delegations and headed toward her assigned place. Something caught her eye. The human section stood completely empty. This was unusual. Humans were always punctual, sometimes annoyingly so. Their lead ambassador, Dae-hyun, had never missed a session in the 5 years since his appointment. Hyun looked around, expecting to see the human delegation rushing in late, but the entrance remained clear. Ji-won noticed it too. The Trandosian counselor leaned over from his seat. "Where are the humans?" he asked, his voice carrying concern rather than curiosity. "I don't know," Hyun replied. She accessed her communication panel and searched for any messages from Earth's delegation. Nothing appeared. No cancellation notice, no request for delay, no emergency transmission. The silence felt wrong. The session began despite the absence. High Arbiter Sunwoo called the chamber to order, his ancient voice still strong and clear. He acknowledged the empty human seats with a brief mention, noting that they would follow up with Earth's government after the session. Routine matters proceeded as scheduled, but Hyun couldn't focus on the trade agreements being discussed. She kept glancing at those empty seats, 12 chairs in a neat row, each one bearing the emblem of the Terran Authority. They looked abandoned, though that seemed like too strong a word. Yet what other word fit? During the mid-session break, Hyun approached Ji-won. "Have you heard anything from your contacts in the outer systems?" she asked. Ji-won shook his head. "Nothing. I checked during the economic report. All human colonies are showing active beacon signals, but no one is responding to hails." "That's impossible," Hyun said. "They have colonies on 47 worlds. Someone would respond." "You would think so," Ji-won agreed. Young Minji worked 3 levels below the main council chamber, in the Intelligence Division's monitoring center. She was relatively new to her position, having joined only 8 months ago. Her job involved tracking communication patterns and flagging anomalies for senior analysts. Around midday, her system flagged something unusual. She pulled up the alert and stared at it. Every single registered human transmission beacon had gone silent within a 6-hour window, 3 standard cycles ago. Not offline. The beacons still transmitted their automated signals, but no actual communication accompanied them. Minji ran the search again, certain she had made an error. The results came back identical. She expanded her search parameters to include all human-registered vessels, stations, and settlements. The pattern held. Everything human had stopped communicating at almost the same moment. She forwarded the report to her supervisor and flagged it as high priority. Within an hour, she was summoned to the Council's Emergency Committee room. High Arbiter Sunwoo studied the data Minji presented. Around him sat 5 other senior counselors, including Ji-won and Hyun. They had been called together after Ji-won raised concerns about the human absence. "This data is verified?" Sunwoo asked. "Yes, High Arbiter," Minji replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've run multiple checks. The pattern is consistent across all human territories." "Could it be a technical failure?" Hyun suggested. "Perhaps a cascading system error?" "The beacons still function," Minji explained. "They're transmitting location data and status reports. It's only the manned communications that have ceased." Ji-won pulled up a star map showing human territories. They formed a scattered network across 2 galactic arms, connected by major trade routes. "If this were an attack, we would see signs of it. Distress signals, emergency beacons, something." "And if it were a mass evacuation?" Hyun asked. "Could they have left?" The room fell silent. The idea seemed absurd. You couldn't evacuate 47 colony worlds without anyone noticing. The logistics alone would be impossible. Sunwoo made his decision. "Commander Haeun, I want you to lead a reconnaissance mission to Sol System. Take a full investigative team. Ji-won, you'll accompany them as council representative. Find out what happened to the humans." Haeun was a decorated military officer who had served the council for 3 decades. She assembled her team within hours. Besides Ji-won, the group included Young-ho, a scientist specializing in abandoned settlements, and Yoonji, a linguistics expert who had studied human culture extensively. The journey to Sol system took 6 days at maximum fold speed. During the trip, the team reviewed everything they knew about humanity. Humans had joined the Galactic Council 80 years ago, shortly after they developed faster-than-light travel. They had been model members, cooperative, innovative, and generally peaceful. They contributed significantly to technology exchanges and had mediated several interspecies disputes. They showed no signs of discontent, Jiwan said during one of their briefing sessions. No political upheaval, no economic collapse, no external threats that we knew of. Maybe that's the key phrase, Heian replied. That we knew of. They emerged from fold space at the edge of Sol system. Earth hung in the distance, a blue and white sphere that looked perfectly normal. Heian's sensors detected active power grids, functioning satellites, and operating orbital stations. Everything appeared fine except for one detail. No one responded to their hails. The team approached Earth cautiously. Heian kept weapon systems ready, though she couldn't imagine what they might need to fight. They passed several human vessels on the way in, each one drifting with active engines but no crew responses. They entered Earth's atmosphere and descended toward the largest human city. The skyline rose before them, towers of glass and metal gleaming in the sunlight. Traffic control systems guided them to a landing platform automatically. The city below moved with purpose, trains running, lights cycling, vehicles following their programmed routes. But no people walked the streets. Heian's team disembarked wearing environmental suits despite Earth's breathable atmosphere. They moved through the empty platform into a terminal building. Inside, shops stood open. A cafe had cups of liquid on tables now cold. A newspaper lay on a bench dated 3 cycles ago. It's like everyone just vanished, Yoonji whispered. Young-ho scanned the area with his equipment. No signs of violence. No evidence of panic, no bodies. They just left. Jiwan stood in the center of the terminal, turning slowly to take it all in. But where did they go? And why didn't they tell anyone? Those questions hung in the air, unanswered. Heian's team spread through the city, documenting everything. They found homes with meals half-eaten, laboratories with experiments still running, schools with lessons written on boards. Everywhere they looked, they found evidence of life interrupted, but no evidence of what interrupted it. As night fell over the empty city, Heian filed her initial report back to the council. Her message was brief but disturbing. Humanity appears to have voluntarily abandoned Earth and all their territories simultaneously. No signs of force or coercion. Reason unknown. Continuing investigation. In the council chambers far across the galaxy, High Arbiter Sunwoo read the report. He looked at the empty human seats and felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Something unprecedented had happened. Something that shouldn't be possible. Humanity had left the galaxy, and they hadn't said goodbye. Commander Heian's team spent 2 weeks exploring Earth and its neighboring worlds. Everywhere they went, they found the same disturbing pattern. Cities functioning without inhabitants. Farms harvesting crops that no one would eat. Power plants generating electricity for empty homes. It was as if humanity had simply stepped out of reality, leaving everything else to continue without them. The team expanded their search to Mars, then to the outer colonies in the Sol system. On Mars, they found research facilities still operating, experiments still recording data, and greenhouses growing food. But like Earth, not a single human remained. Young-ho spent his days analyzing the abandoned spaces, looking for clues. He found personal items everywhere: photographs, clothing, books, music players. Humans had left behind their possessions as if they no longer needed them. This bothered him more than he wanted to admit. People didn't abandon their whole lives without reason. Yoonji focused on the digital records. Human computers remained accessible, protected only by basic security that the Council's technology could bypass. She found normal communications up until 3 cycles ago. Work emails, personal messages, entertainment records. Then everything stopped at once, as if someone had flipped a switch. On the 17th day of their investigation, Young-ho made a discovery on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. The gas giant loomed in the sky above as he explored a research station built into the ice. Deep beneath the surface, his scanners detected an anomaly, a sealed chamber that didn't appear on any station maps. Heian brought the full team to investigate. They cut through multiple security doors to reach the chamber. Inside, they found a climate-controlled vault containing data storage devices, unlike anything in the standard human technology catalog. These were quantum-locked, designed to resist tampering and decay for centuries. They wanted us to find this, Jiwan said, studying the vault's construction. The security was strong enough to survive, but not strong enough to keep us out permanently. Yunji connected the devices to her analysis systems. Encrypted files filled her screens, thousands of them all locked behind complex codes. But one file remained unencrypted, clearly labeled in multiple languages. Read this first. The file contained instructions for decrypting the rest of the archive. But the process wasn't simple. The encryption key was split into mathematical puzzles that would take time to solve. Yunji estimated 3 to 4 days of continuous work. Why make us work for it? Heian wondered aloud. Maybe they wanted to give themselves time, Jiwan suggested. Time to get far enough away that we couldn't follow. The team set up a temporary base in the Titan research station. Yunji worked around the clock, solving one puzzle after another. Youngho and the others assisted, though Yunji's expertise in human languages and cryptography proved essential. On the 4th day, the encryption broke. Files began opening, revealing documents, videos, and data logs. Yunji's hands shook as she accessed the first major file. It was labeled the detection event. The document was dated 8 years ago. A human deep space observatory had detected unusual readings from beyond the galactic rim. At first, they thought it was an equipment malfunction. The readings suggested something massive moving through dark space, something so large it bent space-time around itself. Yunji called the team together. They watched video logs from human scientists discussing their findings. The footage showed confusion, then disbelief, then growing horror as they realized what they had discovered. The thing beyond the rim wasn't a natural phenomenon. It moved with purpose, slowly but steadily toward the galaxy. Human scientists spent 2 years studying it, trying to understand what it was. They never found a definite answer, but they gathered enough data to terrify them. It's drawn to something, a human scientist said in one video log. Her name tag read Dr. Bora. We're still analyzing the pattern, but preliminary data suggests it's attracted to certain quantum signatures, specifically those generated by advanced civilizations. More files revealed the terrible truth. 6 years ago, human scientists confirmed their worst fears. The entity was real, it was coming, and it would reach the galaxy in approximately 300 years. But that timeline wasn't fixed. The entity's speed increased as it detected more quantum activity. The more advanced civilizations operated, the faster it approached. Youngho pulled up the calculations. They estimated that if the galaxy knew about this threat and began preparing defenses, the increased quantum activity would accelerate the entity's arrival to about 80 years. 4 generations instead of 15, Jiwan said quietly. The archive contained more. 4 years ago, humanity had begun debating their options. The video log showed scientists, politicians, military leaders, and ordinary citizens engaged in intense discussions. They argued, they cried, they struggled with an impossible choice. One option was to warn the Galactic Council immediately. This would give everyone time to prepare, but it would also cause massive panic. And worse, the defensive preparations themselves, the weapons, the ships, the quantum shields, would accelerate the entity's approach. Another option was to stay quiet and hope someone found a solution, but human scientists believed no defense would work. The entity was too large, too powerful, too incomprehensible. Fighting it would be like ants trying to fight a flood. Yunji found the file labeled the third option. Her voice cracked as she read it aloud to the team. The third option was exile. Humanity would leave, all of them simultaneously, using technology they had developed in secret. They would take their quantum signatures with them and travel in the opposite direction from the entity's approach. With luck, it would follow them instead of continuing toward the populated galaxy. They spent 2 years building the Exodus fleet in dark space. Yunji continued reading. They developed quantum fold technology far beyond what they showed the Council. They found a way to transfer consciousness into protected vessels, reducing each person's quantum footprint to nearly nothing while keeping them alive. So-min, a junior analyst who had joined the team on Titan, spoke up. They were trying to become invisible, small enough that the entity might ignore them, but still detectable enough to lead it away. The archive contained the final preparations. Humanity had staged their departure carefully. They made it look natural, conducting business as usual until the very end. Then over a period of 6 hours, 3 cycles ago, Every human had transferred their consciousness into the waiting Exodus fleet, hidden beyond the galaxy's edge. Their physical bodies remained behind briefly, just long enough to ensure the transfer was successful. Then those bodies had been dissolved at the molecular level, leaving no trace. The Exodus fleet had departed immediately, traveling perpendicular to the entity's approach vector. Hayun found a navigation file. It showed the fleet's projected course away from the galaxy, away from the entity, away from everything. The journey had no destination, only a direction. Humanity would travel for centuries, maybe forever, leading the entity away. They sacrificed everything, Ji-won said. Their homes, their worlds, their place in the galaxy, all to save us from a threat we didn't even know existed. But there was more. Yoonji discovered a subsection of files labeled Monitoring. Humanity hadn't just left. They had planted quantum-entangled relay stations throughout dark space. These stations tracked the entity's movement and transmitted data back to Sol system. Even now, years into their exodus, humans were still watching the threat, still gathering information. The data confirmed their plan was working. The entity had changed course slightly, following humanity's quantum trail. It was moving away from the populated galaxy, drawn by the 15 billion human consciousness signatures traveling through the void. Young-ho calculated the new timeline. If humanity hadn't left, the entity would have reached the galactic rim in 287 years, assuming current activity levels. With humanity gone and the entity following them, the arrival time has been extended to at least 450 years. They bought us over a century and a half, Soman whispered. The final file in the archive was labeled "To the Galactic Council." Yoonji opened it with shaking hands. It was a message, text only, written in the formal language of diplomatic communication. The message explained everything clearly and without emotion. Humanity described the entity, the threat it posed, and the choice they had made. They provided all their research data, all their calculations, and all their monitoring equipment specifications. They left instructions for how to maintain the relay stations and how to interpret the data they sent. The message continued with technical specifications for defensive technologies humanity had developed but never used. Shielding systems, detection arrays, evacuation protocols. Everything they had created during their 4 years of secret preparation. They were giving the galaxy every tool they had discovered. Near the end, the message addressed the obvious question: why didn't they tell anyone? We debated this choice for months, the message read. We consulted our best philosophers, our spiritual leaders, our ordinary citizens. The conclusion was always the same. Telling you would have forced you to make impossible choices under panic. It would have created political chaos and possibly galactic war, as species competed for resources to build defenses. The council chambers had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled, and additional observers lined the walls. News of humanity's departure and the reason behind it had spread through the galaxy like fire. Species from every corner of populated space wanted to hear the evidence and witness the judgment. High Arbiter Sun Woo called the emergency session to order. His voice carried the weight of his 140 years of service. We gather today to examine evidence regarding humanity's departure and to determine what verdict, if any, should be rendered. Commander Haeon presented the findings first. She spoke clearly and professionally, describing the abandoned worlds, the data vault on Titan, and the decoded messages. Large screens displayed the evidence as she spoke, images of empty cities, graphs showing the entity's approach, and excerpts from human communications. The chamber remained silent as Haeun explained the entity itself. Something vast and incomprehensible, moving through dark space, attracted to the quantum signatures of advanced civilizations. The more technology a species used, the more it drew the entity's attention. Humanity calculated that if they had warned us 3 cycles ago, our defensive preparations would have accelerated the entity's arrival by over 200 years. Haeon concluded. They chose to leave in silence to prevent this acceleration. The silence broke immediately. Representatives erupted into argument, their voices overlapping in dozens of languages until the translation systems could barely keep up. They had no right, shouted Seo-hyun, ambassador from the Praxis Federation. They made a decision that affects every living being in the galaxy without consultation. That's not heroism, that's tyranny. They saved our lives, Hyun countered. While we sat here debating trade agreements, they discovered a threat that would have killed us all and found a way to stop it. Sunwoo struck his resonance staff on the floor. The sound cut through the chaos, demanding attention. We will hear all arguments in order. Ambassador Seo-hyun, you have the floor. Seo-hyun stood, her breathing heavy with emotion. The Galactic Council was founded on principles of cooperation and shared decision-making. Humanity violated every one of those principles. They conducted secret research, built secret technology, and made galaxy-altering decisions without input from a single other species. She pulled up data on the screens. Look at this. They developed quantum fold technology decades ahead of what they shared with us. They built an Exodus fleet in secret. They had the capability to transfer consciousness between vessels, something we didn't know was possible. What else were they hiding? Taehyun, a young council member from the Outer Territories, stood next. Ambassador Seo-hyun is correct. Humanity positioned themselves as friends while keeping secrets that made them potentially the most powerful force in the galaxy. How can we trust their motives? Ji-won rose to respond. I led the investigation team. I saw their worlds. I read their records. Everything humanity kept secret was used for one purpose: to save us. The quantum fold technology? Designed for the Exodus. The consciousness transfer? Necessary to reduce their quantum signatures. Every secret had a reason. A reason they decided on alone, Seo-hyun shot back. What happens next time? What if another species discovers a threat and decides we're too primitive to handle the information? Do we accept paternalism as the new standard? The debate raged for hours. Some species argued that humanity's choice was the only moral option given the circumstances. Others insisted that withholding information was never acceptable, regardless of the reason. A few questioned whether the entity even existed, suggesting humanity might have fabricated the threat to justify their departure. During a recess, Young-ho approached Ji-won privately. There's something else in the data I haven't presented yet. Something that might change the debate. What is it? Young-ho displayed his findings on a portable screen. I analyzed humanity's military records over the past 50 years. They maintained defensive networks they never revealed. Nothing aggressive, but sophisticated detection grids and shield technologies far beyond what they deployed publicly. Why would they hide defensive technology? That's the interesting part. Look at the deployment dates. Young-ho highlighted several entries. They started building these systems 6 years ago, right after they confirmed the entity's existence. And look here, they dismantled everything before they left. Every weapon, every shield generator, every detection satellite. They left nothing that could be used for military advantage. Ji-won studied the data. They could have been the dominant military power in the council. Yes, but they never used it. Never threatened anyone. Never even let us know it existed. And they deliberately destroyed it all rather than leave it behind. When the session resumed, Ji-won presented this new information. The revelation shifted the mood in the chamber. Species that had been critical of humanity grew quieter, considering what this meant. Kyung-mi, an elderly scientist respected across multiple species, requested permission to speak. Sunwoo granted it immediately. I have spent the recess reviewing humanity's calculations, Kyung-mi said, her voice thin but clear. Their mathematics is sound. If they had warned us, the resulting activity would have accelerated the entity's arrival substantially. But I wanted to verify their conclusion that defense was impossible. She displayed complex equations on the screens. Based on the data humanity gathered, the entity exists partially outside normal spacetime. Our weapons wouldn't harm it. Our shields wouldn't stop it. Every defensive preparation we might make would only serve as a beacon, drawing it closer and faster. So they were right? Someone called out. There's no way to fight it? I cannot say with certainty, Kyung-mi admitted. But based on current understanding, humanity's assessment appears correct. The entity is not something we can fight. We can only avoid attracting its attention. This revelation sobered the chamber. The debate shifted from what humanity should have done to what the Council should do now. Woo Jin, commander of the Council's joint military forces, stood. I've reviewed the defensive technologies humanity left behind. They're remarkable, but they're not weapons. They're detection systems and early warning arrays. Humanity gave us the tools to see the entity coming, but not to fight it, because fighting it is impossible, Hyun said quietly. Perhaps, Woo Jin agreed. Or perhaps humanity simply didn't find the solution in the 4 years they had. They gave us what they could and hoped we'd find more. A new voice spoke up. Analyst Yuna from the Intelligence Division had been reviewing the data from the relay stations humanity left behind. "Hi, Arbiter, may I present additional evidence?" Sunwoo nodded. Yuna displayed the relay network on the main screens. "These stations are still active. They're still monitoring the entity and transmitting data back to Sol system. But look at this." She highlighted specific signal patterns. "The transmissions aren't automated. Someone is actively maintaining these stations, updating their programming, refining their sensors." The implication took a moment to register. Then Somin, who had helped discover the data vault, spoke up. "Humanity is still out there, still watching the entity, still protecting us. They're not just running away," Ji-won added. "They're leading it away while simultaneously gathering as much data as possible. They're still trying to help us understand the threat." The chamber fell silent again. This changed the nature of the discussion. Humanity hadn't simply abandoned the galaxy and forgotten about it. They were still engaged, still working, still sacrificing. Ji-hoon, a veteran diplomat known for his philosophical approach, stood slowly. "We face a question rarely asked in galactic history. How do we judge those who make impossible choices? Humanity faced a threat we don't fully understand. They had limited time and limited information. They chose a path that seems to have worked. The entity is following them away from us. Should we condemn them for the method of their choice or acknowledge the results of their action?" "Both," Seo-hyun insisted. "We can acknowledge what they did while still condemning how they did it. Otherwise, we excuse any future species that decides they know better than the rest of us." Taehyun agreed. "If we accept humanity's choice without criticism, we create a dangerous precedent. Any species could justify any action by claiming they were protecting the greater good." But Nari, the Council's spiritual advisor who rarely spoke in formal sessions, raised her hand. Sunwoo recognized her immediately. "Perhaps we asked the wrong question," Nari said. Her voice was soft, forcing everyone to listen carefully. "We debate whether humanity was right or wrong. But right and wrong assume clear choices. Humanity faced unclear choices. They chose between silence and panic, between paternalism and chaos, between their own survival and our safety." She looked around the chamber. "They chose to carry the burden alone rather than share it with us. Some see this as an insult. I see it as a gift. They took the terrible knowledge, the impossible choice, and the unbearable sacrifice onto themselves so we wouldn't have to." "That's still paternalism," Seo-hyun argued. "Yes," Nari agreed, "but is all paternalism wrong? When parents shield children from horrors they cannot yet understand, we call it love. When humanity shielded us from a choice that had no good answer, what should we call it?" The question hung in the air. No one had a ready answer. Sunwoo struck his resonant staff again. The 3 days between sessions felt more like 3 years. Across the galaxy, species held their own debates. News networks broadcast discussions between philosophers, scientists, and ordinary citizens. Everyone had an opinion about what humanity had done and what the Council should decide. In his private chambers, High Arbiter Sunwoo reviewed statements from 47 different species. The divide was clear. Roughly half saw humanity as saviors who made the ultimate sacrifice. The other half saw them as arrogant decision-makers who had no right to choose for everyone else. A small group remained uncertain, unwilling to commit to either position. Ji-hoon spent his time drafting a formal speech. He had decided to make one final argument before the vote, one that he hoped might bridge the gap between the two sides. He wrote late into the night, crossing out sections and rewriting them, searching for the right words to express something that felt beyond language. On the second day, Minho arrived at the Council station. He was a prosecutor from the outer systems, known for his sharp legal mind and his unwavering commitment to galactic law. He had requested time to present a formal case for condemnation. Minho met with Seo-hyun and others who supported judgment against humanity. They gathered evidence and prepared arguments. Their position was clear. Regardless of humanity's intentions, they had violated fundamental principles of galactic civilization. To excuse these violations would be to undermine the very foundation of the Council. Meanwhile, Yuna continued her analysis of the relay stations. She worked with minimal sleep, driven by a feeling that she was missing something important. The transmissions from the stations followed predictable patterns, updating every few hours with new data about the entity's position and trajectory. But on the evening of the second day, she noticed something unusual. One transmission contained more than just data. Hidden in the quantum encoding was a brief message, text only, no identification of sender. Still watching. Still learning. Hope you are well. Eunice stared at the message. Someone from humanity's Exodus fleet had sent this. They had included it in the regular data transmission, knowing it might be found. It was a small gesture, but it carried enormous weight. Humanity hadn't forgotten the galaxy they left behind. She forwarded the message to G1 immediately. On the third day, the council reconvened. The chamber was even more crowded than before. Species that rarely attended formal sessions had sent representatives. Wanting to witness this historic moment, Sunwoo called for opening statements. Minho stood first, representing the position for condemnation. High Arbiter, Honorable Counselors, Minho began. We face a simple question with a simple answer. Did humanity violate the fundamental principles of the Galactic Council? The answer is yes. They conducted secret research. They built secret technology. They made decisions affecting all species without consultation. These are facts, not opinions. He pulled up the Council Charter on the screens. Article 7 states that all major technological developments must be shared for the common good. Article 12 requires notification before any action that might affect galactic stability. Article 23 demands transparency in all interspecies relations. Humanity violated all three. Minho's voice grew stronger. Some argue that humanity's intentions excuse their actions. I disagree. Good intentions do not justify breaking laws. If we accept humanity's choice, we tell every species that they can ignore the rules whenever they believe they have good reasons. This path leads to chaos. Humanity had time to warn us, Minho continued. They discovered the entity 8 years ago. They could have called an emergency session. They could have presented the data and allowed the council to decide together how to respond. Instead, they chose to decide for us. They chose to treat us like children who couldn't handle difficult truths. He paused, looking around the chamber. The entity may be real. The threat may be genuine. But humanity's response was still wrong. We cannot build a galactic civilization on the principle that some species know better than others. If we do not condemn humanity's actions, we accept paternalism as policy, and once we accept it, we can never reject it again. Minho sat down. The chamber remained quiet, considering his words. Jihoon stood next. High Arbiter, I wish to present a different perspective. Sunwoo nodded. Proceed. Prosecutor Minho is correct that humanity violated the letter of our laws, Jihoon began. I do not dispute this. But laws exist to serve justice, and justice requires context. We must ask not only what humanity did, but why they did it and what the alternatives were. Jihoon displayed data from the human archives. Humanity spent months debating their options. Their records show genuine anguish over their decision. They knew they were violating council principles. They knew some would see them as traitors. They made this choice anyway because they believed it was the only way to save us. Consider the alternatives, Jihoon continued. If humanity had warned us 8 years ago, what would have happened? Based on historical precedent, we can make reasonable predictions. First, there would be panic. Species would rush to build defenses. Resources would be redirected. Economic systems would collapse. Political alliances would fracture as species competed for survival advantages. He pulled up more data. Second, the defensive preparations themselves would accelerate the threat. Humanity's data clearly shows that the entity is attracted to quantum activity. The more we prepare to fight it, the faster it would come. We would create the very catastrophe we sought to prevent. Third, and perhaps most important, there would be no good solution. Humanity's research suggests the entity cannot be fought with current technology. So we would spend decades in panic, building weapons that wouldn't work while the entity arrived centuries earlier than it otherwise would have. Jihoon's voice softened. Humanity spared us this fate. They took the burden of knowledge onto themselves. They took the burden of decision onto themselves. They took the burden of sacrifice onto themselves. They did this knowing we might hate them for it. They did it anyway. The chamber stirred with murmurs of discussion. But Prosecutor Minho is also right about one thing, Jihoon acknowledged. We cannot simply excuse humanity's actions because the outcome appears positive. We must establish principles that guide future choices. So I propose we ask a different question, not whether humanity was right or wrong, but whether we would have done better. He looked around the chamber. Would we have done better? If we had received humanity's warning 8 years ago, would we have made better choices? Would we have remained calm and rational? Would we have avoided the panic and the acceleration of the threat? Or would we have done exactly what humanity feared we would do? No one answered. The question was too uncomfortable. During a brief recess, Sujin approached several senior counselors with a concern that had been troubling her. She was young for her position, representing a species that had joined the council only 20 years ago. But her question was important. What if humanity's sacrifice is only temporary? She asked. What if the entity eventually loses interest in them and turns back toward us? Shouldn't we be preparing now, using the technologies they left behind? Do-yoon, the council's chief engineer, had been thinking about the same question. I've examined the technologies humanity provided. They're sophisticated but incomplete. The consciousness transfer technology that allowed their exodus is missing. Several key components of their quantum fold systems are absent. It appears they deliberately withheld certain information. Why would they do that? Sujin asked. 2 possible reasons, Do-yoon replied. Either they wanted to prevent us from following them and interfering with their mission, or they wanted to prevent us from making the same choice they made. Perhaps they saw their exodus as a unique solution to a unique problem, not a template for others to copy. This revelation troubled Sujin. So we can't follow them even if we wanted to? Not with the technology they left behind, Do-yoon confirmed. When the session resumed, Sujin presented her concerns. We debate whether humanity's choice was ethical, but we should also discuss what happens next. If the entity eventually turns back toward us, are we prepared? Should we be using this time to develop solutions humanity didn't find? Kyungmi, the elderly scientist, responded. That is precisely what we should be doing. Humanity bought us time, perhaps a century, perhaps more. We should use that time wisely, not waste it debating the ethics of how we received it. Nari, the spiritual advisor, stood once more. I wish to share a thought that came to me during meditation. We speak of humanity as if they were still here, as if we are judging beings who can hear our verdict. But humanity is not here. They are traveling through dark space, leading a threat away from us. Our verdict will not reach them. It will not change their situation. It will not alter what they have already done. She paused, letting this sink in. So who is this verdict really for? It is for us. We are deciding not what humanity deserves, but who we are. We are choosing what kind of civilization we want to be. Do we want to be a civilization that condemns those who sacrifice for others? Or do we want to be a civilization that acknowledges the complexity of impossible choices? We can be both, Minho argued. We can acknowledge humanity's sacrifice while still maintaining. The morning of the vote arrived with unusual quiet. The council station, normally buzzing with activity, felt subdued. Representatives moved through the corridors speaking in hushed tones, as if raising their voices might break something fragile. High Arbiter Sunwoo arrived early. He stood in the empty chamber looking at the human seats. In his 140 years of service, he had witnessed many historic moments. But this one felt different. Today the council would judge beings who weren't present to defend themselves. Today they would render a verdict that might define their civilization for generations to come. As the chamber filled, Sunwoo noted the attendance. Every species had sent their highest-ranking representatives. Some had sent multiple observers. The gallery overflowed with journalists, academics, and citizens from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to witness this moment. Sunwoo called the session to order precisely at the designated time. We gathered to cast our verdict regarding humanity's departure and the circumstances surrounding it. 3 options stand before us: condemnation, recognition, or suspension of judgment. He explained the voting procedure. Each species would cast 1 vote. The verdict would be determined by majority. But Sunwoo hoped for something closer to consensus. A narrow victory for any position would leave the galaxy divided. Before voting began, Sunwoo opened the floor for final statements. Several representatives stood, but Minji rose first. As a junior analyst, she had no formal standing in the council, but Sunwoo recognized her anyway. High Arbiter, I know I'm not supposed to speak here, Minji began, her voice nervous, but I was the first to notice humanity was gone. I was the first to see the pattern in the data, and I discovered something last night that the council needs to know before voting. Sunwoo nodded for her to continue. Minji displayed new data on the screens. I've been reviewing human population records. Every human who left registered their consciousness transfer in a central database before departure. 15 billion individuals all accounted for, but last night I found an anomaly. One human wasn't in the departure database. The chamber grew very quiet. His name is Dr. Inwu. According to his records, he's a xenobiologist who studied entity class phenomena. And according to medical records from Mars, he entered cryogenic suspension 3 cycles ago, the same time humanity departed. Jiwan stood abruptly. Where is he? Mars, Minji replied. The medical facility is automated. His suspension pod is still active, and it's programmed to wake him if certain conditions are met, specifically if the Council discovers and decodes humanity's archive. The implications rippled through the chamber. Humanity had left someone behind, a witness, someone who could answer questions, provide context, explain their reasoning directly rather than through archived files. Sunwoo made an immediate decision. Commander Haeun, take a team to Mars, wake Dr. Inwu and bring him here. We will delay the vote until he arrives. Haeun left immediately with a medical team. The council recessed, though no one left the station. They waited in common areas, discussing this new development in low voices. Some thought it changed everything. Others believed it changed nothing. One person couldn't speak for an entire species. The journey to Mars took 2 days at maximum speed. Haeun's team located the medical facility easily. Inside, they found a single cryogenic pod, its systems operating smoothly, waiting patiently for activation. The medical team worked carefully, bringing Dr. Inwu out of suspension slowly to avoid shock. He was elderly. His records showed he was 93 when he entered cryosleep. His body was thin, his face deeply lined, but his eyes opened clear and aware. How long? He asked weakly. 3 standard cycles since humanity departed, Haeun replied. Dr. Inwu nodded slowly. Did you find the archive on Titan? Yes, we decoded it. The council knows everything. Then I suppose you have questions, Dr. Inwu said. That's why I stayed. Someone needed to be able to answer questions. They transported him back to the council station. Medical staff monitored him constantly, ensuring his aged body could handle the stress. Dr. Inwu used the journey time to review everything that had happened since humanity's departure. He read the council's debates, watched recordings of the arguments, studied the proposed verdicts. When they arrived at the council station, thousands had gathered to see the last human. Dr. Inwu walked slowly through the corridors, leaning on a support staff, observing the various species with scientific interest. He smiled slightly when he saw Jiwan. You led the investigation, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Jiwan confirmed. You knew we would find the archive. We hoped you would. We made the encryption difficult enough to survive, but simple enough to eventually break. The goal was to give humanity time to get far enough away that you couldn't follow. The council reconvened with Dr. Inwu present. Sunwoo offered him a seat in the human section, but Dr. Inwu declined. I'm not here as humanity's representative. I'm here as a witness. I'll stand if that's acceptable, Sunwoo agreed. Dr. Inwu, why did you remain behind? The old scientist looked around the chamber. Because we knew our departure would raise questions. We knew some would think we abandoned you. Others would think we betrayed you, and some might think we fabricated the whole thing. Someone needed to stay behind to provide context, to answer honestly, to help you understand. Why you? Seo Yun asked. Why not an ambassador or political leader? Because I helped discover the entity. I spent 6 years studying it. And because I volunteered. I had no family in the Exodus fleet. My wife died 15 years ago. My children were already gone. I had nothing to leave behind except my work. Minho stood. Dr. Inwu, do you believe humanity had the right to make the choice they made without consulting the council? Dr. Inwu took his time answering. Rights are a complicated concept, prosecutor. Did we have the legal right? Probably not. Did we have the moral right? I don't know. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a scientist who saw data that terrified me and a species who made a choice that broke my heart. But was it the right choice? Minho pressed. Right compared to what? Dr. Inwu asked. We ran simulations. We modeled what would happen if we warned the council. Every simulation ended badly. Panic, acceleration of the threat, probable extinction of most advanced civilizations within 2 centuries. We modeled staying silent and remaining in the galaxy. Those simulations ended even worse. We modeled our exodus. The projections were better, though not guaranteed. We chose the option that gave the galaxy the best chance. Jihoon spoke next. Dr. Inwoo, humanity spent months debating their choice. What was the strongest argument against leaving? Dr. Inwoo smiled sadly. That we had no right to sacrifice ourselves for others without asking permission. That our departure was itself an act of paternalism. That every species deserves the chance to face threats and make their own choices, even if those choices lead to disaster. And what countered that argument? Jihoon asked. The faces of everyone we loved. The thought of watching children grow up knowing we had doomed them. The weight of knowledge we couldn't unlearn. We debated ethics for months. In the end, we made a choice we could live with. Or in this case, die with. Nari asked gently. Do you regret staying behind? Every day, Dr. Inwoo replied honestly. I don't regret that someone stayed, but I regret that it had to be someone. I regret that we couldn't be honest from the beginning. I regret that we live in a universe where these choices exist. What message did humanity want to leave? Nari continued. Dr. Inwoo looked at the empty human seats. That we're sorry. That we tried to do what we thought was right. That we hope you'll use the time we bought you to find solutions we couldn't find. And that we hope someday you'll understand why we left the way we did. Sunwoo asked the question everyone wanted answered. Dr. Inwoo, does humanity expect forgiveness? The old scientist shook his head. No, High Arbiter. We don't seek forgiveness. We don't seek gratitude. We don't even seek understanding. We only hope that when you look at the empty spaces we left behind, you remember that someone once chose to carry the darkness away from the light. He pulled out a data device from his pocket. This contains updated information on the entity, transmitted from the relay stations. The Exodus fleet is still monitoring, still gathering data, still trying to understand the threat. They're also transmitting a message, not to the Council, to any species who might face similar choices in the distant future. The message played on the screens. It was brief, spoken in every human language, then translated into every known galactic language. The hardest decisions are made not by those who stay and fight, but by those who leave so others don't have to. We don't know if our choice was right. We only know it was ours to make, learn from us, do better than us, survive. The chamber sat in silence after the message ended. Dr. Inwoo continued, I have one final request. I wish to return to cryosleep. I have no desire to live in a galaxy my species abandoned, but I'll remain available if you need me to answer more questions. Wake me if humanity returns. Wake me if you need my testimony. Otherwise, let me sleep until this story has an ending. Sunwoo considered this. We will honor your request. But before you return to suspension, will you stay long enough to hear our verdict? Dr. Inwoo nodded. I owe humanity that much. The vote proceeded. Each species stood and announced their choice.